Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, as promised, I am doing TV series. They're old series and new series, a bit of everything, but just the ones that I like and ones that I suggest that you hunt down if you haven't already got them. Some of them are going to be hard to find, but you can look around, see what's available. Some of them are only available in Region B, which is not my fault, but nonetheless, they're things I recommend, they're things I think you should have, and I'm going to tell you about them. First, I'm going to tell you what they are. Well, now we get started with a bit of 1960s crime, and in this case, Honey West, with Anne Francis and John Erickson, and Bruce Hupes Ocelot. Really cool series. There are 30 episodes on 4 DVDs on this one. It's Region A, from what I understand. Let me have a look. Yeah, it is. And I picked it up a number of years ago. I know it's still available on places like Amazon, but this one you should have in your collection because strong female protagonist. Anne Francis is in top form on this. She's not just the cute love interest on another planet the way she was in Forbidden Planet, but she's a self-reliant, tough female private eye. Terrific series. I know a lot of female fans of crime love Honey West, and I can understand why. Good plots, good mysteries in them. I only went one season because it's American TV in the 1960s, and in the 1960s, American TV was run by blokes who really didn't know a good thing when they had it. But there's the back cover with Anne Francis looking lovely. Recommend this one. It's good to dip into some episodes every now and then. When I feel like it, I do. I don't know if it's available on streaming services where you are, but I know it's not available on any of the streaming services that I can access here. But I'm glad I got physical media of this, and I appreciate it. And again, it's a precursor for many things that followed afterwards. Even things like Jessica Jones, both in the comics and in the short-run Netflix Marvel series, owes a debt of gratitude to Honey West. So let's get on to the first anthology science fiction series I ever watched as a kid. We'll start with season 1 because it makes sense. The Outer Limits, and I've been thinking this through. This is the original series, not the redone series from the 80s and 90s. There's Volume 1, there's Volume 2. Pretty thick boys, but I'm glad I've got them in my collection of physical media. I like the Outer Limits more than I like the Twilight Zone, I think. I've kind of been thinking it through, and right at this moment of time, I like the Outer Limits more. I like the monsters in it. I think there's some really sharp acting in it. Not that there wasn't in the Twilight Zone. But I like the Outer Limits aesthetic. I like the fact that it doesn't particularly have a strong frame in the way that the Twilight Zone had Rod Serling on the set smoking a cigarette and explaining the didactic moral lessons of each episode. I like the control voice as a framing device much more than I like Rod Serling being the framing device as he was in the Twilight Zone. But yeah, there are just so many good episodes, and they've got good writers as well. Of course, you've got Harlan Ellison. I've talked about Soldier and Demon with a Glass Hand before on the channel. But The Outer Limits is definitely a treasurable TV series to have in your collection because of that strong linking to the science fiction community. The fact that there's not an episode that's really terribly weak. There are some that are kind of ordinary, but there's no real standout WTF episodes, and I appreciate that. And for me, it's right up there with other iconic series like Kolchak the Night Stalker in its importance to the depiction of science fiction in television, and it's got to get some respect for that. While we're on that subject, these I picked up cheaply when there was a sale because again they're iconic. They're 1960s iconic. They've had a long tail right up to this very week. And also like a lot of the guest stars on this series. It didn't get a lot of love when it first came out, but since then it's been wonderfully iconic. Of course, it's Star Trek. The original series, this is the one with the redone special effects on the Enterprise orbiting the planets and all that kind of thing. So there's Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. Now for me, this is a bit like the Mission Impossible series. For me, this is a bit like the Mission Impossible movie series, in that in the Mission Impossible movie series, I like the movies, but I don't like Tom Cruise. And I like original Star Trek, though I don't like William Shatner. Personal choice, personal opinion. But it has that kind of thing where it's everything around the main protagonist that I like. in a particular thing, and that's the case with Star Trek, the original series. I think that Shatner's acting in it is very mannered, whereas there's a much more naturalistic approach from people like DeForest Kelley, for instance, and James Doohan. But Shatner's acting draws attention to itself way too often in that series. And I'm glad I've got a physical copy of it, because these things can be altered in the future. If somebody decides that some of the terms used in the original Star Trek aren't considered culturally appropriate in the current era, then I don't doubt that Paramount and other people will change them. So having like a reference copy of an old TV series is important now. I don't want any comments in the comments using terms like woke and PC. I think there are cultural changes, and we're trying to navigate through them. There are always going to be missteps when that happens. I think giving cultural context is much more important in these things than changing the text or changing the visuals in a movie or in a book or in a TV series. But that's an argument for another day. So we've got that. We've got Star Trek, we've got Honey West, we've got The Outer Limits. Let's do something Australian. And people who were brought up in a certain era in Australia are laughing at all of the arguments against drag queen story time in libraries and drag in general, because we grew up with Auntie Jack, Graham Bonder's Auntie Jack, with the big red dress, riding a Harley Davidson with a boxing glove on, with a really gruff voice. Terrific sketch comedy which took the piss out of Australian culture in the 1970s. There's the second season. You can tell it's the second season because it's got Kid Eager in it played by Gary McDonald, instead of John Durham's narrator Neville, which was in the first series. Auntie Jack had an enormous cultural impact on people at the time. It was transgressive, it was silly, it mocked the posh people in Australia, it mocked suburbia as well. Really interesting, fun sketch comedy with a frame. Auntie Jack living in a house with Flange Desire, a beautiful woman in a superhero costume, and Thin Arthur, played by Rory O'Donoghue, and narrator Neville and Kid Eager. It's got songs, it's got pastiches. It really did, and I use this term because Auntie Jack was a boxing glove. It punched above its weight as far as comedy in Australia in the 1970s were concerned. And I love it. It's one of those unashamed loves for something of the past that you were young and you watched then. There's got to be a word for it. Maybe there's a word in German that's like this long for that kind of thing. But that nostalgia for things of our youth that other people in other times might not understand is a very strong, powerful thing in our culture and in culture in general. I may have done this one before. This is a non-recommend. The Dick Tracy Show cartoon series, full of racist stereotypes with things like Joe-Jitsu and things like that. It's really weird because Warren Beatty's got the right Dick Tracy, and every few years when the rights come up again, he does something on television or a streaming service or something else to retain the rights of this 1940s and up to the 1960s in comic strips. Intellectual property that he thinks he's got some money to make on it. He made the movie, of course. But the Dick Tracy TV series was something of my youth. But I rewatched a few episodes in the last few years. And after I got off the toilet, I just kept cringing. But the animation's very, very basic and silly. The jokes don't land, and the crime and the criminals are kind of ordinary. There was a big phase of kind of crime hero things in cartoons at the time, but it hasn't aged well. Whereas this one, about very romantic people. I know I've got volume 1, this is volume 2 and volume 3 I have to pick up, and they've still got the stickers on them. The Addams Family. The Addams Family I thought was much groovier than the Munsters. The Munsters was a little more self-conscious. I'm not dissing it. The Munsters were still fun. But the Addams Family were the cool ones. They were the ones with the extended family that were a little more nuanced. They, of course, had Ted Cassidy as Lurch and John Aston, who's still around, as Gomez, and Caroline Jones playing Morticia. And, of course, Uncle Fester, played by Jackie Coogan. Just a lot of fun. Vic Mizzy's music made it as well. The set designs were fantastic. The basis, based of course on the Charles Addams cartoons, was sharp. I saw the recent series as well Wednesday, and I kind of like that as an extension of it. But for me, the old school Addams Family, with the Vic Mizzy harpsichord music and Ted Cassidy's wonderful lurch, just a chef's kiss good fun TV, where they're friendly and nice and everybody else is freaked out or nasty. It is one of those series which I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it was one of those series that led to the acceptance of diversity and freakiness and diversity and interest. These days, the Addams Family will be less of a concern in a wider cultural context than they were in the 1960s. These days, you've got a father who likes to crash trains with his kid and use explosives to blow them up. But people go, yeah, as long as you're safe, do it. Throwing knives in the house, as long as it was safe, do it. That kind of stuff. Freaky relatives who seem to be mostly hair. Yeah, well, diversity's there as well. The Addams Family was the leader of acceptance and diversity in television, and I will always love them for many other reasons, including that. Talked about the movie of this, but it's a lot of fun and still watchable for me. If you incline to self-medicate, you can always have a good time with Puff and Stuff. The Sid and Marty Krofft series with Jack Wilde and Billy Hayes. A lot of fun. I always thought that Puff and Stuff himself was gay because you hear one of those kind of campy, gay, southern accents. And I always kind of thought that Puff and Stuff himself was a little bit on the rainbow spectrum, let's say. But, people may disagree. This is the whole series. I've also got the movie. I've got the soundtrack to the movie on vinyl as well. Love age up Puff and Stuff, always will. Again, it's one of those things that you saw as a kid that people in later generations may not understand, but for which I have an abiding and enduring love. This one's from about 20 years ago, and it's a series that you should have in your collection. Spaced, with Simon Pegg and Jessica, what's her last name in this one? Because she changed it, Jessica Stevenson at the time, but she's now changed her name to something else. But Spaced, directed by Edgar Wright with Nick Frost as well. Fantastic fun. Geeky pop cultural references abound in every episode. Pastiches abound in every episode. The use of non-diegetic music in the background and for montage sequences is fantastic. It's a lot of fun. This is Series 1 and Series 2 plus bonus stuff. I picked this up in the UK when we were there in 2004, which shows how long ago it was. How do you open this sucker? They've even got little chibi things of the characters there on the inside, which is a lot of fun. Let's see. Oops, disc slipping out. But yeah, Spaced is a lot of fun to rewatch. Really groovy, shared house kind of comedy, but with a very science fiction and kind of genre-based geekery about it, which I love. Holds up well. The comedy's funny. The characters are on point. And Spaced is something you need to have in your collection. Let me have a look at what else we've got. Based on a really good novel, which I read before the series ever came out. It was a one-season wonder for HBO, which should have gone to a second season. Stars Journey Smollett and Jonathan Majors, who's recently had some problems which may stall his career in a big way. He's the guy who plays Kang, the Conqueror, in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Lovecraft Country. Really good Lovecraftian stuff set in the 1950s among black communities in America. This one, the monsters are fantastic in this. The story's fantastic. The characters are nuanced and complex. The writing on it is perfect. And I like it a lot. I'm going to rewatch this one soon when I get a chance to. It may well be still on a streaming service like HBO, but I like having a physical copy of it. And if you haven't seen Lovecraft Country, I think you should. It's taking a different viewpoint on Lovecraftian monsters, let's say. And there are time-traveling middle-aged women in it. There are some really freaky monsters. There's a gay character who's treated with sensitivity and nuance. Worth watching, worth having a copy of. Then there's a Marvel Netflix one. Remember back 10 years ago when Marvel and Netflix were doing collabs? And they did Jessica Jones, and they did The Punisher, and they did Iron Fist, and then they did The Defenders. They also did Luke Cage. Now, in Australia, only the first season of this came out on physical media. And I picked it up because apart from, I like Mike Colter playing Luke Cage. I like what they've done with the story here. And there are some great supporting characters as well. There are some really great needle drops in this. The use of music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and into the 90s in this series is fantastic. And no superhero series that I know of, or even superhero movie that I know of, has blended culturally appropriate music with a superhero narrative as well as this did. It's really worth checking out if you haven't, and it's really worth rewatching. Then they have live performances as well by some of the performers, and it is really, really terrific. I like this out of all proportion because I grew up watching blaxploitation movies, and this has got something of the same feeling in a way. I really have to rewatch the other two series as well, though I'm not as fond of the second and third series as I am of the first. But Luke Cage, definitely worth checking out there. These ones are really weird because 14 episodes of a series. And so is that. The Persuaders with Tony Curtis and Roger Moore, one of those ITV series of the 1970s. Good John Barry soundtrack, lots of good guest artists. Two rich guys, one from a poor background, one from a privileged English aristocratic background, traveling around Europe, doing adventures, basically. It's low risk, low rent, couple of aging guys before, of course, Roger Moore did James Bond. He did The Persuaders with Tony Curtis, and it still has a lot of fun. Some of it, of course, is cringe because it's 1970s. But I like the locations, I like the shooting, it's beautifully shot. And the action sequences and some of the plotting and scripting is pretty damn good as well. So The Persuaders is worth checking out. Now, this last one is a deep cut that most of you aren't going to dig. In the 1980s, there was a manga in Japan called Urusei Yatsura, which means Those Obnoxious Aliens. And in 1981, they made an anime TV series of it, and in 2022, they readapted the manga into Urusei Yatsura. Now, I saw the 1980s anime TV series, and on a punt, I bought this, which is the first season of the 2022 reboot of the original manga. It's about a guy called Ataru, who's a horny teenager who's got a girlfriend called Shinobu, and who is selected randomly among all the people in the world to fight an alien who wants to conquer the Earth. If he wins, the aliens don't conquer the Earth. If he loses, then the aliens conquer the Earth. And the aliens champion is the female character there, Lum, who is the daughter of the conqueror. She's cute, she's got horns, she can fly, she can electrocute people. And almost by accident, Ataru beats her and wins the competition, which is to, within a week, grab her by the horns without her permission. And so, due to various confusions, it's a kind of rom-com thing. Due to various confusions, he ends up with two girlfriends, one of whom is a cute extraterrestrial, and the other, Shinobu, is a cute but angry human girl. There's the three of them on the back. It's a lot of fun. It's silly. It does justice to Rumiko Takahashi's original manga, and it kind of semi-updates it to the modern era, but not too much. And even though I like the music of the original series a lot more, there's some really nice kind of Japan pop songs and tunes in this one. Like I said, it's not going to be for everybody, because not everybody likes anime and manga as much as I do. I mean, I like it intermittently. I go through phases of liking. But anyway, those are the TV series that I wanted to recommend. They're a lot of fun to watch and continually enjoyable for me. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. And if you really enjoyed the video, you can donate to the channel as little as $1 American a month via Patreon at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next time around, I got a few things. I'm going to do a bit of a movie haul. My birthday was yesterday, and so I went out and we did a little bit of trolling around thrift stores and op shops, as we call them here, and found a few things, and I got a few other things as part of the birthday haul. So I'm going to do those for the next video, and then I'm going to do some more science fiction again, as always. Anyway, in the meantime, look after yourselves. Watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some old TV series that you loved in the past but haven't seen in a long time. And I'll catch you next time.